Hi friends, this is Kim from Creative DIY Purpose. Welcome. Today we'll create 5 pieces of home decor. For 2 of those projects, we'll use some pieces of scrap wood, and the other 3, we'll take some thrift store items and give them a new makeover. For our first project, we're going to give this thrifted tray a fresh new look. And here's a list of the products that we'll use to transform this piece. And all products can be purchased from the Hive, and I've posted her link below. The silk paint that I used by Dixie Belle does have a primer in it. So after I clean the tray, I applied 2 coats of the silk paint, and this is in the color Oyster, and it's my new favorite color. Next, we're going to take some decoupage gel from ReDESIGN, and along with their beautiful paper. This is called Shabby Roses. I love working with this paper. You don't have to worry about it tearing because it's on the thicker side. And as I've said before, to me it reminds me of a dryer sheet as far as the thickness and the texture. So because it has lines in it set up to look like wood slats, I want to make sure that the lines are kind of even between the edges of the tray. I think I was off a centimeter or so, but for the most part, I think it came out okay. Instead of cutting the piece ahead of time to fit in the tray, I was afraid that I might cut it too short. So I decided to add the decoupage gel on now. And once it dries, I'll use the X-Acto knife to trim off the side and the top. So I applied the decoupage gel in small sections. And I have found that since this paper is so easy to work with, that it is okay if you get a little heavy-handed with the decoupage medium. But as always, I do recommend working in small sections. Now I'm taking a clean cloth and pressing out any bubbles, making sure it's smooth. Then I repeated those steps until I've got all of the paper glued on. And next I'll take that clean cloth and go all along the edges to make sure that it's tacked down before I cut off the excess paper with the X-Acto knife. I did realize as I was doing this that there was a small section up at the top that needed a little bit more of the glue mixture. Next, taking a sharp X-Acto knife, I cut along the edge. And this is like the equivalent of taking off painter's tape. It's very satisfying. But you want to make sure that you're taking your time so that that knife doesn't slip and cut the paper the wrong way. I'm also taking my time and using caution because I don't want to accidentally nick any of the paint off. After the edges of the paper have been trimmed, then I will apply a coat of the decoupage gel over the paper. And then before I apply the colored wax, I will let this sit for a few hours and completely dry. One of the reasons that I love this decoupage gel is it dries matte and doesn't have a shine to it. I set the tray aside and let it dry for a couple hours. Next, I apply a clear wax by Dixie Belle along the edges. And then I applied some of their black wax right over the top of the clear. I did not wipe back the clear before applying the black wax because I wanted to be able to control that black wax in case I got it too heavy. So I went along with the wax in very light layers around the outside, wiped it back, and then decided where I wanted to add a little extra, especially up along the top and in the cutout for the handles. Then with the pouncing motion, I did add a little bit of black wax to the decoupage paper where I thought that it needed it. And then did the same along the outside edges and on the bottom of the tray. Some of you may know that I took a year off from social media and YouTube and have just recently come back to both. And because I took that time off, I became rusty with my video editing and video making. And I definitely need to brush up on those skills, but I'd also like to learn some new ones. So I decided to join the community over at Skillshare. And I'd like to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. And I'm currently taking a class for video content creation with Canva by Cheryl Chan. There are thousands of classes available, and you can view the lesson topics, read the About section, the reviews, and even more before choosing a class. I love that I can pause the lessons as I need to, and I can even rewatch them as many times as I want. You can even take multiple classes at a time and take them from the comfort of your home or on the go. If there's a topic that you're interested in learning more about, chances are Skillshare has a class for you. I think you'd enjoy this creative community. I've posted the link below, and the first 500 people to join Skillshare using my link will get 1 month premium for free. Next, let's make a simple decor project using scraps of wood. You'll want 2 longer pieces that are the same length. I used 16-inch pieces of pallet wood, and you'll want 2 shorter, narrower pieces that are going to be the length of the width of the 2 pieces of wood that you've chosen to use. Once you have your pieces cut out and lightly sanded, you'll want to set them up because we're going to apply wood glue. I found that it's easier to put boards underneath and raise the item up off the table, so that way I don't glue the paper that is on my table onto whatever piece I'm working on. I apply a generous amount of Gorilla Wood glue to the inside of the 2 boards, place them on there, and then I'll do the same with the 2 end pieces. That's going to help provide stability and put everything into place. I'll let it sit there for a few hours so that glue can dry completely before moving on to the next step. So now once it's completely dry, I take it and flip it over, and then we're going to add 3 finishing nails on the end of each board, making sure that I'm hammering into that bottom wood piece that we glued on last. So this simple yet versatile piece can be used as a self-standing shelf sitter. You could add hangers to use it as wall decor, or you could add handles to the top and make it a tray. Or you could use it as a wood riser like I'm going to display this one. You could add multiple boards and also make them in any length that you choose. I decided to use a general store stencil from thestencilsmith.com because every item that I put this stencil on sells. So I figured, why mess with a good thing? And it fit on here perfectly. I did put some 220 sandpaper on my sander and ran over the top of it lightly to give it a vintage age look. So let's make another scrap wood project. This is an easy, simple project that only requires a few pieces to create. And the idea came from creating those repurposed shutter candle boxes. When you make them out of wood, you can make them any length and width that you choose. And for this one, I want to be able to fit 3 mason quart jars, and you can use them as vases or as candle holders. Here's the supply list if you'd like to take a screenshot. And we'll do something different for this box. I decided to paint it and add a stencil. So you'll want your bottom piece and your side pieces the same length. And then you'll want to cut 2 pieces for the end. The first thing I like to do is grab the board that I'm going to be placing on the bottom, which again, it doesn't matter as long as it's one of those longer boards, and apply a generous amount of wood glue to one of the sides. Then lay the board down on the table and take one of the other wood pieces and put it in place. And this is going to create one of the sides to the box. Now, you could put all of your wood glue on these pieces and clamp them, wait for them to dry, and drill your pilot hole, and then hammer your nails in. I find it much easier and quicker to just do it all at once. And if you do it this way, you don't need any wood clamps. So applying wood along this bottom side, and then taking the side of the box and putting that into place. Then using a very small drill bit, I'll drill in one pilot hole up at the top, one in the middle, and then one down at the other end. Then hammer a nail in each of those holes and repeat on the other side. Then I stand the box up on its side because it's easier. Sorry, it's so close. Apply wood glue and then drill in the pilot holes and hammer the nails in for that side piece. I realized when I was putting it together that I never did the final sanding on the box. So after I get the box together, I do take it outside and use some fine grit sandpaper to smooth up all those edges. Next, I'm taking Silk Paint by Dixie Belle, which has a primer in it. And this is my new favorite color. This is called Oyster. Do you guys do that where you change favorite colors, or do you have one that you always stick with? I applied 2 coats of paint over the entire box, including the inside and the bottom. Then using the Old Fair stencil from the Stencil Smith, I thought that I would stencil on part of it on both sides of the box. After I applied one of the stencils, I took a fine paintbrush and filled in all of the spaces in between the letters. Sometimes I don't do that, but I decided for this piece to go ahead and do that. Once I had a chance to dry, I decided to flip it over and do a different part of the stencil on the other side. Next, I will take some clear wax and apply a layer of that over each side of the box. Wipe that back and then apply some of the black wax very lightly along the edges. And I try to do this in layers, and that helps to control it better so it doesn't get muddy looking. I took a cloth and wiped that back, and then you see adding a little bit more here and there, and then flipping the box over and doing the same steps on the other side. Instead of soaking these mason jar bands in vinegar to age them, I decided I would paint them black, and that would kind of match the lettering in the stencil. I gave them 2 coats of the silk paint in the color Anchor, and then take them outside and spray them with some matte sealer from Rust-Oleum. Next, we're going to do a quick upcycle project and give this wood and metal shelf a new look. Because of all the detail and little areas in those metal leaves, I really should have spray painted them. It would have been easier, but I didn't realize it until I started trying to get in there with the paintbrush. So I just kept going. I applied 2 coats of the oyster paint to the entire piece and set that aside and let it dry. I decided to paint the leaves green, and I didn't have the shade of paint that I was looking for, so I mixed some of the oyster and some of the Acadia color paint from Dixie Belle, and I really love this shade of green. I had to move some of the metal pieces to be able to get in there to be able to paint the leaves. Then taking a dry brush with that green, went lightly along the edge of the shelf just for a little pop of color. Next, I apply some clear wax from Dixie Belle and to both the top and bottom of the wood shelf. I wipe that back and then go in with a little bit of white wax. There's a lot of texture on those leaves and I wanted to help bring that out. Then I take a cloth and wipe that back. And the final touch is to take some copper gilding wax from Dixie Belle and just placing some on my fingers, going along the edges of the leaves and a touch here and there on the metal grapevine. What else could I have done to this shelf, or what would you have done differently? For our final project today, let's repurpose this silver-plated dish. This did have a lid to it at one point, and I'm not sure what happened to it. And we're going to do something similar to what we did last week, but we'll change it up just a bit. The first step is to apply 2 coats of silk paint in the color Oyster. That does have a primer in it. If your paint doesn't have a primer, I do recommend applying some sort of primer because the surface is so slick. All right, and I had this little piece. This is from the Dixie Belle transfer, the vintage post. I love coffee, so I was thrilled to add this to this little dish. I thought that this would be cute, like by a front door to hold keys, or next to your bed to hold your jewelry at night, or maybe your cell phone and charger. And this week for this project, I did make sure that the piece was completely dry. I actually let it dry overnight because I wanted this transfer to go on smooth and all in one piece and not have any blubs like the one I did last week. So after I applied this transfer, I realized that I was off-centered a little bit. So I was thankful that I had that little piece of trim that was off of another transfer. So I added that over on the side to even it out. And then there was one little piece left. I decided to add that right up to the top. Next, I covered the transfer with some clear wax and up along the edges of the dish. That will help seal it, seal the paint in, and then I add some white wax to my brush and go along the trim. This will help bring out the detail in the trim. Next, I take a cloth and wipe that white wax back. Next, I apply a very small amount of the black wax to my brush and go right along that edge. And that will help bring out some of that beautiful detail in that trim. I repeated that step a few times till I got it where I wanted, and then decided to add just a little bit more along the inner rim of the dish. Instead of adding any gilding wax along the edges, I wanted to bring a little bit of that silver color through. So using the wood stick that came with my transfers, I went along the edge. You could also do this with a damp cloth or even some fine grit sandpaper. This step did take me a little while because I didn't want to take away too much paint. So I would do a little bit at a time and then go around the outside with a cloth and take a look at it. And so finally when I got it how I wanted, as far as the distressing went, and then I did a few more touches of the dark wax where I thought it needed it. And you guys will have to let me know which project today was your favorite. Friends, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a super blessed week, and I will see you next Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.